can tell you that consistent with the President's previous statements about how we will protect against, monitor, and respond to cyber incidents, this is something that's being treated as a serious national security matter. There is evidence to indicate that we have seen destructive activity with malicious intent that was initiated by a sophisticated actor. And it is being treated by those investigative agencies, both at the FBI and the Department of Justice, as seriously as you would expect. It has also been the subject of a number of daily meetings that have been convened here at the White House that have been led by both the President's Homeland Security Advisor and occasionally by his cyber coordinator. This includes senior members of our intelligence community and Homeland Security officials, military, diplomatic, and law enforcement officials as well.
What is the United States going to do about it?
Well, before we start publicly speculating about a response, it's appropriate that we allow the investigation to move forward. I do understand that the investigation is progressing, and that as the members of the national security team meet to discuss this matter, they are considering a range of options. As they do so, though, they're mindful of the need for a couple of things. They're, first of all, as we would be in any scenario, sort of strategic scenario like this, they would be mindful of the fact that we need a proportional response, and also mindful of the fact that sophisticated actors, when they carry out actions like this, are oftentimes, though not always, but often, seeking to provoke a response from the United States of America. They may believe that a response from us in one fashion or another would be advantageous to them. And so we want to be mindful of that too. And the President's national security team is mindful of those two important strategic considerations as they consider a range of available responses.
There's been a big debate over Sony canceling the interview. What has the President said, or has he expressed any opinion about a movie that depicts the assassination of a sitting head of state?
I haven't talked to him about that. What I can say as a general matter is that the President and the administration stand squarely on the side of artists and other private citizens who seek to freely express their views. Sometimes those views can be laced with criticism, or are sometimes intended to provoke either some kind of either comedic response or one that is intended to be some element of some pretty biting social commentary. All of that is appropriate and well within the rights of private citizens to express their views. And the President has certainly been on the receiving end of some expressions like that. And while we may not agree with the content of every single thing that is produced, we certainly stand squarely on the side of the right of private individuals to express themselves. And that is a view that that is strongly held by this administration, as it has been throughout the history of our country.